Thank you very much for joining us today despite your occupied schedule. We would like to start the Toyota Motor Corporation's financial result announcement for the period ending in March 2022. First of all, let me introduce to you the members present for this briefing. Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, Kenta Kon. Executive Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, Masahiko Maeda. Chief Communication Officer, Jun Nagata. And Accounting Group Chief Officer, Masahiro Yamamoto. Now, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, Yamamoto will share with you the overview of the financial results. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Masahiro Yamamoto. We would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to our customers around the world who chose us, as well as our shareholders, dealers, and suppliers who support us. We would like to express our sincerest gratitude to all the stakeholders. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused to our customers due to the recent production volume reduction. We will work hard to deliver our product as soon as possible. First, let me explain the summary of our performances for the fiscal year ended March 2022. Under the production constraints due to the spread of COVID-19 and semiconductor shortages, dealers, suppliers, and production sites have all worked tirelessly in order to deliver as many cars as possible to customers. Despite soaring materials prices and increase in expenses for the investment in new business fields, we achieved growth in revenue and profits thanks to cost reduction and marketing efforts. This is attributable to the improvement of our revenue structure, which we have been working on for a long time towards one that is not dependent on foreign exchange rates and volumes. As for the forecast, we have set our production volume assumption to an appropriate level, having safety and security as our top priority. We expect a decrease in our operating income due to unprecedented increases in materials and logistics costs. However, we'll continue with our future investments and promote our various activities.
As for the shareholders' return, the year-end dividend is 28 yen per share
and maintain a steady increase. Share purchases will be up to 200 billion yen, including 100 billion yen set aside to enable more flexible share repurchases than before, while considering share price levels. Let me explain our performance for the fiscal year ending in March 2022. Consolidated vehicle sales for the period was 8.23 million units, which was 107.6% of the consolidated vehicle sales for the same period of the previous fiscal year. Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales was 9.512 million units, 104.7% of the same sales of the same period of the previous year. The ratio of electrified vehicles was 28.4%. The consolidated financial results for this fiscal year were sales revenue 31,379.5 billion yen, operating income 2,995.6 billion yen, income before income taxes 3,990.5 billion yen, and net income of 2,850.1 billion yen. I would like to explain the factors that impacted operating income year on year. First, the effects of foreign exchange rates increased operating income by 610 billion yen. Second, cost reduction efforts decreased operating income by a net of 360 billion yen. This consisted of 280 billion yen increase due to cost reduction efforts and 640 billion yen decrease due to the impact of soaring material prices. Third, marketing efforts increased operating income by 860 billion yen, largely due to the increase in sales volume and improved earnings in the financial services business. Finally, an increase in expenses decreased operating income by 220 billion yen. As a result, excluding the overall impact of foreign exchange rates and swap valuation gains and losses, and other factors, operating income increased by 280 billion yen year-on-year. As shown here, the operating income for each region increased year-on-year in all regions. This is largely due to the impact of foreign exchange rates, cost reduction, and marketing efforts. Next, let me explain our business in China as well as the financial services business. As for business in China, both the operating income of consolidated subsidiaries as well as our share of profit of equity method affiliates increased mainly due to the impact of foreign exchange and marketing efforts. Regarding the financial services business, operating income excluding swap valuation gains and losses for the fiscal year increased year-on-year, largely due to the increase in the lending balance and margins. Next, let me explain the return to shareholders. We plan to make a year-end dividend of 28 yen per share. We will continue to aim to pay stable and sustainable dividends while maintaining and improving upon our consolidated dividend payout ratio in the medium to long term in order to reward shareholders who hold our shares over the medium to long term. As for share repurchases, we set the maximum limit to 200 billion yen, including 100 billion yen set aside to enable more flexible share repurchase than before while considering share price levels. Aiming at enhancing capital efficiency, we plan to implement share repurchases in a flexible manner, taking into account various factors including investment in growth, dividend levels, cash on hand, and share price levels.
Next, I will explain the forecast for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Consolidated vehicle sales is expected to be 8,850,000 units, which is 107.5% of the previous fiscal year, with growth in sales expected in all regions. As for Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales, it is expected to be 9,900,000 units, which is 104.1% of the previous fiscal year. As for electrified vehicles, by improving our product lineup to better meet customers' needs in each region, sales are expected to be 3,070,000 units, which is 113.6% of the previous fiscal year. We expect that the ratio of electrified vehicles will amount to 31.0% of vehicles sold. Towards carbon neutrality, we will continue to make efforts to provide a wide range of options to meet the needs of each region and hence be selected by customers in those regions. Next, let me explain the forecast for the full-year consolidated financial performance. We have adopted forex rate assumptions of 115 yen per US dollar and 130 yen per euro. Based on this, our forecast for the full-year consolidated financial performance are sales revenues 33 trillion yen, operating income 2,400 billion, income before income taxes 3,130 billion yen, and net income of 2,260 billion yen. Next, I would like to explain the factors that impacted operating income. First, the effects of foreign exchange rates are expected to increase operating income by 195 billion yen. Second, cost reduction efforts are expected to increase profits by 300 billion yen, while the impact of a sharp increase in materials cost is expected to be 1,450 billion yen, resulting in a total decrease of 1,150 billion yen. Marketing efforts are expected to increase operating income by 815 billion yen, largely due to the increase in sales volume. Finally, an increase in expenses is expected to decrease operating incomes by 440 billion yen. Although we continue to face a difficult business environment, we will continue to further improve our profit structure and accelerate our efforts to transform into a future mobility society. This concludes my presentation on the financial results. Next, EVP Mr. Kon will talk about changes in profit structure. I am Kenta Kon. Although the results for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2022 are for a single fiscal year, they represent the accumulation of improvements so far in our profit structure. So I would like to add a few words from that perspective. These graphs compare the change in our operating income in the year of the 2009 global financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic last year, in each case compared to the previous year. In both cases, sales volume decreased by 15% compared to the previous year. But at the time of the global financial crisis, profits decreased significantly, pushing Toyota into the red, while in the fiscal year ended March 2021, we were able to secure a profit. This shows the break-even volume for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2009 onward. If we assign our break-even volume at the time of the global financial crisis a value of 100, we have lowered our break-even volume most recently to the 60 to 70 range, demonstrating that we have made significant progress in improving our condition over the past 13 years. This is not something that could be done overnight. Immediately after the global financial crisis, we had to put the brakes on all of our R&D expenditures and capital investments. We could not do any investments in the future. But while overcoming the numerous crises known as the six hardships, such as our quality crisis, we continuously worked to improve our profitability. Improved profitability was not something that Toyota was able to achieve on its own. Rather, it was the result of a desperate and concerted effort with all of our stakeholders. To them, we say thank you. During that period, as one of Toyota's strengths is having a full lineup of products globally, we shifted to an in-house company system that would allow us to provide high-quality and reasonably priced vehicles at the right place and time to an even higher degree. Along with the in-house company system, we introduced a Toyota Global Architecture, or TMGA, a shared vehicle platform to improve the basic performance and product appeal of our vehicles and enhance the reflection of regional characteristics with the aim of not being the best in the world but the best in town. In the past, we often introduced completely new vehicle models on a one-off basis as the market grew. But now we are continuously evolving our long-time best-selling cars, such as the Yaris and Corolla, to keep them current so that they can go on being long-time bestsellers. We believe that this has resulted in our being able to increase profitability. I would like to explain the changes in our profit structure over the past 6 years since we transitioned to our in-house company system. Looking at the factors behind increases and decreases in operating income, our profit has increased despite major negative factors such as foreign exchange rates, sales volume, and increases in materials prices. In terms of sales, our greater than 2 trillion yen improvement in profit is due to sales price revisions and a reduction in selling expenses. We believe that this is a result of our customers highly evaluating our products. Also, both sales vehicle quality helped customers maintain high vehicle value, leading to improved profitability not only in the automotive business but also in the financial services business. In terms of cost improvements, we believe that significant improvements have been achieved by the effect of switching to new products that are based on the TMGA platform and through the power of our production work sites, including those of suppliers, which can respond to the launch of various new products and environmental changes, as well as produce high-quality products. We used to increase profit through foreign exchange rates and volume growth, but this has certainly changed over the past 6 years. Comparing 2015 and 2021, we have increased our market share for new car sales in 11 of the 15 major countries, including China, the United States, and Japan. The graph on the right shows the buy model used car prices in the U.S. 3 years after purchase. Our RAV4 has received higher appraisals than vehicles by other manufacturers in the same segment, and it is evident that those appraisals have gotten even higher since we switched to the TMGA-based RAV4. Being able to command a high price in the used car market protects the value of customers' owned assets, and we believe this is building trust in our brand. Our in-house company system, best-in-town activities in each region, TNGA, product lineup strategies, the creation of ever-better motorsports-bred cars, and the human resource development that supports these activities, as well as various in-house system reforms. As mentioned, although our performance in the fiscal year just ended represents our situation for a single fiscal year, it is a result of efforts that have been ongoing for a long time, and we would like to once again thank everyone involved for their support. Many customers are currently waiting for a long time for delivery of their vehicles. We would like to take this opportunity to apologize again. This concludes my explanation. Thank you.
From here on, we would like to open the floor for discussion Q&A. If you have a question, please press raise hand button on the screen, and when your name is mentioned, please turn on the microphone and also the camera. We would like to receive questions from as many people as possible, so please ask only the maximum of 2 questions, no more than 2 questions. Mr. Fukui of Automotive Journal, Daily Journal. We will switch the screen, and once you see yourself on the screen, please start your question. So, Mr. Fukui, please. Fukui of Automotive Daily Journal, can you hear me? Mr. Fukui, your voice is quite low. Could you once again repeat yourself? Could you? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Yes, thank you. First of all, with respect to the assessment of the financial results of the fiscal year just ended, the sales revenue is 31 trillion yen, and the operating income is around 3 trillion yen, both record high levels. And with respect to those good financial results, how do you assess that? What is your view of that? The second question is as follows. Due to the soaring raw materials prices and cost improvement efforts, according to the information published in the period fiscal year ended, the soaring impact of soaring raw materials prices was 640 billion yen, and for the current period it's already 1.55 trillion yen. Mr. Kon has been talking about 300 billion yen to improve operating income through cost improvement efforts. But I think the soaring raw materials prices is so high that cannot be covered by the further cost reduction. Is there any further room for cost reduction? And including Tesla, overseas manufacturers are increasing their prices. What is your approach to passing on higher raw materials costs to the final prices? Thank you, Mr. Fukui. With respect to the good results of financial results of the fiscal year ending in March 2022, that will be explained by Mr. Kon, EVP, the assessment of that. And for the fiscal year just ended, as the raw materials prices soared, what are we going to do with the cost improvement efforts? Mr. Yamamoto will respond to that. And with respect to pricing, Nagata will respond to that aspect of the question. So first, may I ask Mr. Kon to respond to the first aspect? Thank you, Mr. Fukui, for your question. With respect to our assessment of the fiscal year just ended, earlier, I made additional comments in the presentation, and as reflected there in the fiscal year just ended in March 2022, in terms of the financial results for the full year of that. But up until that particular moment, over 13 years altogether, we made accumulated efforts, which brought down the break-even units, and that reduced the break-even units, and that is the major driver of this financial results. Since this is the financial results achieved in a single year, so it is just 1 year. Over many years that we continue to make efforts. So it depends on the economic conditions prevail in any fiscal year. It's reflected in those numbers, but on the foundation and basis of that is not just the initiatives and activities pursued in that particular fiscal year, but the accumulated efforts for improving profit structure pursued over many years. So in that sense, the fact that we've been able to make this financial results could indicate that good results of our efforts to improve our operating structure is reflected in the manifesto in that. As I said, the financial results reflect the efforts of a single year, but in terms of a production gemba, every day they are engaged in production activities which produce a certain number of units. Sometimes the line is stopped, or at other times efficiency might suffer. So in that sense, the books are closed every single day. So every effort is made to achieve a better results tomorrow than today, and maybe even better results after that. And those efforts pursued over 13 years or so is reflected in the financial results. We have suffered from the impact of raw materials or Omicron variant of COVID, but I think the most important factor and characteristics of this financial results was the continued and accumulated efforts over many years for improving operating structure. That's my assessment of the financial results. Thank you. With respect to cost reduction efforts, if you could refer to slide 60, maybe. Thank you. Yes. 2.4 trillion yen, aiming at that, this shows the water show. It shows negative 1.45 billion yen. That is the soaring materials, and 300 billion yen achieved through the cost reduction efforts, and also from that subtraction of 1.45 trillion yen of soaring raw materials place. And therefore, to continue making efforts to achieve around 300 billion yen in cost improvement efforts, manifestation is something very difficult, but what we have been continuing to do will continue to be pursued going forward. And when the raw materials prices are very high and soared, what sort of materials should we be using is a new aspect that we will consider. So that might represent a certain perspective from which the cost improvement efforts can be continued. So every day probably we can find those new seeds for cost improvement. Lastly, with respect to the efforts to pass on higher cost prices, and let me respond to that. Overall, within Toyota, one of the characteristics of a Toyota is to have the operation of full lineup, both the passenger cars and commercial vehicles on the global side level. So we are operating globally with the full lineup of our products, and therefore in each region we have many different customers in different segments, and we are trying to satisfy those differing needs in a very fine-tuned manner every day. So from that perspective, the products are planned and pricing is made. So there are a variety of customers, different types of customers in that. Because of the soaring raw material prices, sometimes there may be a segment from whom we may be able to receive a higher consideration, but at the same time, there are other segments of customers who need and who use vehicles as means of transportation, as a work vehicle. So from those customers, even if the raw materials prices soared and increased, trying to increase the prices charged to those customers would represent a very difficult thing to do. And as Kon mentioned earlier, for products, we focus on regional differences and different product lines. So in each region, for each lineup of products, where can we set higher prices, or where is it very difficult to change prices, those will be closely examined before decision is made. And that is what we keep in mind even in the current context. And if I may further add, one of the characteristics of Toyota as an OEM, we have the Crown or the Corollas or Hi-Ace. In a sense, there are so-called long-selling brands, and we have so many of those long-selling vehicles. That's one of the characteristics of Toyota as an OEM. And those brands are really enjoying patronage of many customers belonging to many segments. And therefore, for customers with respect to product strength and the pricing, they have a certain level of a market level they keep in mind. So we need to satisfy those expectations, meet those customers' expectations. And therefore, even if inflation has set in to increase price, we'll simply cannot satisfy those customer needs and expectations. So including that aspect, and as Mr. Yamamoto mentioned, we will continue to improve cost not on a single year basis, but also over many years, so that we can meet customers' expectations as much as possible. That's our approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Fukui. Now let us move on to the next question. From Asahi, Kondo-san, please. We will switch the screen, so when you see yourself on the screen, please start your question.
はい、それでは近藤様お願いいたします。
Mr. Kondo, please.
朝日新聞近藤です。
From the Asahi Shimbun newspaper, my name is Kondo.
1問目の質問と若干重なる部分があるんですけども、
This question is related to the first question.
23年3月期今期なんですけども、
The year ended
原材料高のインパクトなんですけども、 前期を超えてですね、か
The
なり
impact of raw
強力な
material
数値となっています。
cost is much
こちら
higher than the
の
previous
市
year.
況をどう見ているのか、
So,
また足元
what
円
is
安
your
も重なってい
perspective
る
on
の
the
で、
market
為
conditions?
替の課題
And
もあ
in
る
the
んじゃない
short
かなと
term,
思うんです
the
が、そ
yen
こら辺のちょっと
is
ご
weaker,
解説
so
いただき
there
た
may
い
be an
のと、
impact of
ま
forex.
た
So, can you
取
tell
材
us
してい
your
るとで
view
す
on
ね、
that? And
裾野のサプライチェー
when
ンです
we
ね、
do
仕
our
入れ先さ
reporting,
んか
if
ら
you look
原
at
材料高で契約
the
されている
supply
ところなんか
chain,
も聞きますけれども、サプライチェーンの支援とか分配について
with
どんなふう
regards
に
to
考えている
supply
か、1
chain
問目教えてください。
assistance, support,
あと
and
もう一問ですけれ
distribution,
ども、2
what
点
is
目
your
です。
view? That is my
世界
first
生産、
question.
グロ
And
ー
the
バル
second
生産
question,
の絡みなんですけども、
in relation to
前
global
期ですね、
production,
当初
last year,
930万台で計
initially
画を行
9.3
ってまし
million
て、
was the
その後見
plan,
直しが
and
相
after
次いで
that, you
着地
reviewed
は
that plan,
857ぐ
and
らいになったと思うん
ultimately
で
you
すけど
had
も、
about
今期
8.57
23
million.
年3月期、
For
970万台と
this
かなり
year,
高い数字になっていますけども、
9.7 million, which is
半
very
導体不
high.
足なんかがある中です
There
ね、
was a
この
shortage of
970といっ
semiconductors,
たその
and
根
yet
拠や理由、
9.7
あるいは
million
で
is
す
the
ね、
number
昨
you
日には
have.
ですね、
Why do you
中
have
国から
this
の部
number?
品不足で
And
国内工場
because
が
of
一部
price
稼働停
shortage
止なんか
from
の話もあり
China,
ました
some
が、
of your
ゼロ
production
コロナな
sites
んかも
in
含めたですね、
Japan is going to
リスクについ
suspend
ての認識も
production.
教えていただける
So
とあり
what
が
is
たいです。
your
以上よろしくお願いします。
perspective on the risk with
はい、
related
近
to the
藤様ありがとうございま
Chinese
した。
zero
最初の質問の
COVID
今期
policy?
の資材高騰の指標
Thank you
をどう見
very
るのか、
much.
それからもう一つ
First,
の
your first
そういったこと
question
も
was
含め
about the
て
soaring raw
サ
material
プライヤーさんに
prices.
対してどう対応
And
していくの
second,
か
how
っていう点でございます。
are we
これは
going to
弊社の
respond
今から
to our
ご説明申し上げます。
suppliers? That will be
それからもう
explained by
2点目
Mr.
にご質問あ
Kwon,
り
the
ました今期
EVP. And your second
970万
question,
台の生産
9.7
に対
million
し
for
て
this year
どういう根拠でやっていくの
production.
か、これは昨日発
What
表
is
しま
the
した
basis
中
for
国の
this?
サプライ
Was
チェー
the
ン影響
question.
の生産の停止、こんなこともある
Because of
中
the
でっていう
Chinese
ことも
supply chain,
加
the
味しながら
production
回答してほ
is
しい
going
と
to
いう
be
ことだと思います。これ
suspended,
は
and you would like to have that
経済
included
本部長の山本からご説明申し上げ
in
ます。
our response. So, Mr. Yamamoto will respond to that second question.
はい、近藤さんありがとうございます。
Thank you very much to Mr. Kondo.
原材料価格市況変動
First about the raw material price and the market conditions. 1.45 trillion yen, as you mentioned, it is unprecedented.
終わった期のですね6400億円という影響も
640 billion last year was the highest ever impact, and this year it's more than twice that number, so the impact was very high.
これまずこれ私ども仕入れ先さんとの間ではですね、
with our
大体
suppliers,
材料の価格については
with regards to raw material prices, in principle, Toyota will bear the burden. That is the basic rule.
それに基づいて
And based
グ
on
ローバル
that
で
rule,
どれぐらいの影響があるかという
globally,
こ
how
と
much
を
impact
足
there will
元の
be,
相場ですとか
taking into
そのルールに
consideration
照らし合わせ
short-term
て
market,
いくらぐらいトヨタで負担をするこ
and
とになるので
how
あろうか
much
ということを見積も
Toyota
った数字でございます。
should bear the burden. That was
足元の円
calculated.
安の方がかなり影響がある
In the short
ではな
term,
いか
the
というこ
weaker
とだったん
yen
ですけれ
may
ども、
have a major
実際には
impact you
この
mentioned,
1兆4500
but
億円の
1.45 trillion, if you look at the breakdown, about half of
海外
that
の
comes
事業体での
from
影響
global
まず
affiliates,
でございます。
subsidiaries
あ
and
と残りが
affiliates,
日本の
and
事業体
the
での影響という
remainder
ことになるんで
comes
すけれ
from
ども、
the Japanese
特に
business.
円安がですね、
In particular, with
これに大き
the
な
weaker yen,
影響があってこの市況の数字が大きくなったということはあまりそういう認識
that
はございません。
we don't think had a major
それからで
impact
すね、
on the
仕入れ
results.
先さんこれ1兆4500こういった資材のイン
Suppliers,
フレの状況は
1.5 trillion
やはり
yen, the impact
OEM
of
とか仕
raw
入れ先さん
material
とかってい
prices
う区別というよりも一
impacts
体となってですね、それみん
both
なで
OEMs and
これをどう
suppliers.
やって
So we have to
対
work
応していく
together
か
to
という
respond
ことを考えて
to
実
the
行していかなきゃいけ
situation,
ない
and we
という
have
ふう
to
に
think
思って
together
おりまし
and
て、
implement the
や
necessary
はり
measures
先ほど山
together.
本本部長も申し上げたよ
As
う
Mr.
に、
Yamamoto
材
mentioned,
料が上がっているということです
the
ので、
raw material
その
prices
使用
have
量
gone
を
up,
できるだけ
so
少なくする
the amount of raw materials used
その
should
材料を
be
より安価な
reduced
材
to
料
the
に
extent
変える
possible, and
よう
when
な取り組み
possible,
みた
we
いな
should
ことをです
use
ね、やっぱりやっていかなきゃいけない
lower
というふうに
cost
思います。
material.
も
Those
ちろ
are
ん
measures that have to be
もう一つ
taken.
やっぱり 車の開発、生産、販売者としてはですね、よりお客様に付加価値をいただけるような商品開発みたいなものでですね、やっぱりお客様にも普及をしていくと。一律に値上げということではなくて、
rather than just simply raising the
さらに
prices,
企業努力をしてですね、
we have to make further efforts as a company in
やはり
product
単年
development.
度で1兆4500億を
In a
すべて
single
吸収
year,
できるということではないと思いますが、
1.45 trillion, that cannot be totally absorbed in a single year. So even if it may take time, we have to take solid steps and measures so that in several years' time,
競争力を維持できる、
we will maintain or improve our competitiveness in the market.
年間3000億の原価改善
cost reduction of 300 billion per year
生活動ですとか、先ほど申し上げたような活
have
動
to be
で
achieved through SSA activities. We have to make further efforts in these areas. So we have a sense of crisis, and we do realize that we have to continue these efforts.
以上でございます。
That's all from my side.
2点目の生産台数について
The second point was about
回答い
the
たします。
production volume.
確かに昨年ですね、
Last
計
year,
画に対する減産というのは
against
本当に
the
度
plan,
重なる状
the
況が続き
production
まして、
volume was
それ
lower,
でも
and we
本当に
repeated
一台
that
一台の
several
車
times.
を
And
気持ちを
each,
込めて作ろうという
but still, we wanted to produce each vehicle
先の皆さんも含めてです
with
ね、
all
本
our
当に
efforts and passion.
感謝を申し
The
上げます
people
し、
at the Gemba
そうい
all
う結果
worked
だと
very
思い
hard,
ま
and
す。
I would like to
で
thank
今
everybody for those
年の今
efforts.
の計画を970万台と
This
い
year's
う
plan,
この数字に対して
9.7 million,
ご質問いただいたと思っていま
and
す。
I think that was the point of your
も
question.
ともと1月の内示の時にですね、
In
1100
January,
万台というふうに
11 million
計画を出させていただいてからの
was the unofficial
970
plan
万台
that
な
we
んですけれど
announced,
も、
and that was
本当
changed
に
to 9.7
この
million.
昨年の状況を踏まえてですね、やはり
Taking into consideration
大
the
事なことは
situation last year,
安全と
what
品
is
質をしっかり
important
守り
is
ながら、
safety and
一台一台の車を
quality
生産活動を続けてい
being
くと
protected
いうこと
and
の
continue to
しっかりと
produce
その原点に立
each
ち直って
vehicle.
も
We
う
have
一度見
to
直
go
してみ
back
ようと
to
いうこと
those
で、
basics.
この970万台という計画、ただこれもまだ
With
先々どうな
that
るか分かりま
thinking,
せんの
we
で、
came up with
これを基
9.7
準
million.
に
We don't know what will
こ
happen
の
to
1
this
年
number
間
in the
進めてい
future,
くことになる
but
と思います。
that
この
is
中には
the approach
コロ
for
ナ
the
の影
next
響です
year.
とか、また半導体今年どれだけ
COVID-19's
今現時点
impact
分かっているのかということを
How much semiconductors can be procured this year have been
現
taken
場
into
の方に
consideration.
もお伺いしたんですけれども、
We asked the people on the
急な
Gemba,
減産というのは本当にその
sudden reduction in
仕事が
production
なくなってしまって、
means they have
別
no
の仕
work
事に行ってしまってですとか、
and
そ
they
の
may be
人の入れ替えがあるだと
switched
か、そういう補
to
充ですとか、やはり
works,
部品が
and
余
there
ってし
may
まった
be
りだとか、置き場がない
replacement
と
of
か、
people,
本当に大
people
変なご苦
people
労
changes
を
and
していただいているということ
they
を
have made
お伺いし
or
ました。
gone through a
やは
lot
り
of
こうやって
struggles.
前々から少しずつその計画がですね、
The
早めにお伝えできれば、そう
If
す
the
れば
plan can be
急に
conveyed
止める
to
こともなく、例えば
the
タクト
people
タイムを下げ
earlier,
て、そうすれば今いる人たちが
for example, by
そのま
reducing
ま
tact time,
仕事ができて、
the
で
people
少し
on
手の
the
空いた人たち
Gemba
は
can
改善活
continue
動
to
をして
work,
と
and
いうよ
if
う
they
な
have
こと
some
で、やはり
spare time, they can work on Kaizen
社長
activities.
社長の今度冒頭の説明にもありましたけど、
As Mr. Kwon
やっぱ
mentioned
人
at
材
the
育成ですよ
outset,
ね。この人材育成を
human
ずっと続
resource
けられて
development
これるっていうこの体質改善の源っていうのもやはりこの現場にあると
will
思ってい
have
ま
to
して、
continue, and
そう
the
いう意味で
Gemba
は
people have
この生産
that mentality of
台数
continuing
こ
human
の活動に
resources
ついては
development.
そういったことも含めてやっていくことになるのではないかなと
So
思います。以
that
上です。
will continue to be kept in mind as we proceed with production
近藤様、あり
activities.
がとうございました。
Thank you very much
それでは
to
次のご
Mr.
質問に参
Kondo.
ります。
We would like to move on to the next question from 中日白石さん。
画面を切り替えますので、ご自
I
身の
will
映像が
switch
画
the
面上に
screen,
表
so
示され
if
ま
you
したら
see
ご発
yourself
言
on
く
the
ださい。
screen, please start your question.
ただいま画面を切り替えてお
We
り
are
ます。
now trying to switch the screen.
中
Shiraishi of Chunichi newspaper. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. I have two questions as well. The question number one relates to Hino Motor Corporation. And because of the misconduct with respect to exhaust gas, and that really lost and impaired the trust and confidence of consumers, and also that really required improvement of a corporate culture. And because of the stoppage of a shipment, the financial well-being of the company is in question. So there are huge and mounting challenge of Hino. As a parent company, how TMC assesses and considers this Hino's problem, and going forward, because of so many challenges facing Hino, the human resources, goods, and financial resources, what sort of assistance and support does Toyota intend to provide to Hino? Second question, you talked about the product-driven management, and you also talked about the efforts for continuous improvement. I would like to ask about your future approach going forward. Thus far, the world has been focused on internal combustion engines, but it is quite true that the increasingly vehicles will be battery EVs. In the case of battery EVs, probably battery cost will be about one half of the overall cost. But in the age of electrification, that would result in different cost structure. How do you intend to keep your cost competitiveness or competitiveness of your products overall? These are my two questions. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi. We received two questions. The question number one related to Hino Motor, relating to the misconduct of that. And as a parent company, how does Toyota respond to that? And Kon, if yes, the Vice President will respond to that question. Second question related to the product-driven management, which Kon talked about in the earlier presentation. In relation to that, in the electrification, including the cost of battery EV, what would be the cost improvement efforts, and also how we will address that. And Maeda EVP will respond to the second question. So, Mr. Kon, please. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi, for your question. With respect to the first question that relates to the Hino Motors, Hino is a consolidated subsidiary of TMC. And the Hino Motor was engaged in the misconduct relating to the exhaust gas and also fuel consumption efficiency. Then customers, the dealers, the suppliers, and also the regulatory authorities who all supported Hino to date received tremendous inconvenience because of this, and the confidence and trust they placed on Hino was completely lost. And as a parent company, I feel really sorry for that. It is indeed very regrettable what Hino did. Hino is a consolidated company engaged in the production and manufacturing of commercial vehicles. And in terms of the supervisory and oversight responsibility for Hino as a parent company, we intend to support Hino and its efforts to restore the confidence of those stakeholders. And as a parent company, we intend to work with Hino to restore such confidence. That, I think, is a role to be played by a parent company. Currently, the Special Investigation Committee composed of outside experts are now investigating the root cause of this problem, and will pay attention to the outcome of that special committee. And bearing that in mind, in terms of the governance of Hino Motors, but not limited to that, the reform of the corporate culture, the promotion of business, including those aspects of Hino Motor, and placing the greatest priority on the efforts to restore confidence and trust of stakeholders and customers. So we really caused this inconvenience, for which we are sincerely sorry for that. That's my response to the first question. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi. So with respect to the second question, allow me to respond to that aspect. In the age of electrification, how Toyota is going to keep its competitiveness? That was your question. The competitiveness, what does that mean actually? As far as we're concerned, the fact that our customers choose our product is the indication of a customers. We think that it is the customers who has the final say on the product decision. Whether we can be our product can be chosen by the customer is the key. And I think there are various different reasons and factors based upon which the choice and decision is made by customers. As Nagata mentioned, some customers will focus on affordable and high quality, but in other segments, customers might refer to value-added aspect, which enhance their lifestyle or they enjoy. And in certain areas where the usage is made in the adverse natural environment, the durability may be the very important factor for the choice of vehicles. So, as Kon mentioned in his own presentation, we will continue with those activities as a part of our efforts to improve operating structure. We had in-house company system. Through that, we focused on what sort of business we are doing on the global scene, what sort of product lineup we have, and paying attention to those different in-house companies focused on their own lineup and made efforts to respond to the customers of those different items. In the past, we tend to focus on volume or margin, but rather some of those in-house companies compete against other in-house companies, so that ultimate efforts will be made to deliver ever better cars to customers, the best vehicles to customers. And if we can share with you slide number 31, this shows one of the characteristics of Toyota. In the different regions of Toyota, where are the regions in which Toyota is doing business? Toyota can be on the top. So it's not that our business is biased in any specific region. We talked about full lineup operation globally. In many different regions, the customers in those different regions throughout the world, as a B2C company, we are allowed to do business. So amongst many different regions, we do receive feedback from customers in different regions. And unless we operate through best-in-town company, we won't be able to capture those feedbacks. In the past, we tend to focus on a certain area, such as services, but through those best-in-town companies, every effort is made to receive feedback from customers. In-house company system is one effort of that, and also focusing on being the best in town is that. So offer value to customers even after the delivery of products and receive feedback from customers. And this reflects the result of efforts Toyota made over the years to improve operating structure. And by doing so, we can develop human resources. So this efforts to improve operating structure also include as one aspect the human resource development as well. And that results in enhanced competitiveness. And those efforts should be continued on a sustainable manner. For the customers to choose Toyota on a sustainable manner, we need to continue with those efforts. There is no end of our efforts for operating structure improvement. Continuous pursuit will lead to the continued customers chosen by the customers. And added to that would be the strength of software going forward. That will represent one new element. So together with Woven Planet, we intend to increase our strength in this software aspect. The vehicles tend to be focused on hardware, but including software going forward, we intend to meet more diversified needs and desire of customers. And standing by the customers with different needs, we intend to enhance our competitiveness because that leads to the better products and improvement of our attractiveness. And I think the only way is to simply make those efforts in a dogged manner. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shiraishi.
Now let us move on to the next question from Yomiuri. Yamamoto-san, please. We will switch the screen, so when you see yourself on the screen, please start your question. We are switching the screen now.
山本様お待たせしました。お願いいたし
Mr.
ます。
Yamamoto, thank you for waiting. Can you hear me?
はい、もう一度お願いいたし
Can
ます。
you repeat yourself? Do you hear me?
はい、お願いいたします。聞こえております。
Yes, please. My name is Yamamoto from the Yomiuri Shimbun, the newspaper. The first question, the forecast for this year. In the United States and Europe, inflation in China has the zero COVID-19, and there is a concern of recession. This year, overseas sales is expected to be 1.5 million. So, in this environment of recession, how do you see the market developing? Now, domestic production 3 million. That was in the forecast again. For TMC, 3 million in Japan. What does it mean to Toyota? Thank you very much to Mr. Yamamoto. The first question I want to clarify. This year, in March 2023, your question was about the overall market forecast? Yes. Then I will answer that question. And the second question was about TMC 3 million production in Japan. What does that mean for Toyota? I think that was your second question. And that would be answered by Mr. Yamamoto from Accounting Group. Your first question was about the overall market conditions. This fiscal year, it's going to be even more difficult than other years to make a forecast. As Mr. Yamamoto mentioned, overall, globally, if there is any positive factor, China still has many restrictions with the zero COVID-19 policy, but overall, a recovery from COVID-19 is going to be a big positive factor. And if you look at the negative factors, as we mentioned in a financial results announcement, the raw material prices are soaring, and inflation in various areas will have an impact on the daily lives of people. So there's inflation, and then there is the Ukrainian factor, and that is causing a lot of concerns in many areas. And next, supply constraints of semiconductors and other parts will be a major limitation in the automobile industry. So these factors will be compounded this year. By region forecast is also very difficult. Let me give you a rough outline of what we are thinking now. China and the United States, roughly speaking, in the year ending March 2022, compared to the year ending March 2022, we will see a slight improvement. And Japan and Asia, we have the positive and negative factors that I mentioned before. And if you add them together, it will be about plus minus zero. So the market will be about the same as fiscal 2021. And the most difficult region to forecast, I think, is Europe. Energy, materials, the Russian-Ukraine issue will have a major impact, and that will have an impact on the economy in general. So we think the risk will outweigh opportunities. So for the European market, I think it will be below fiscal 2021. Those are the rough outlooks of forecasts for the major markets. But that is for now. But the situation in COVID-19 and the Ukrainian situation will change rapidly day to day. So if the assumption in the general market changes, that means a change in the standard. So we'll have to make changes to our business so that we can see improvements in cost, profit structure and delivery to our customers. And towards that end, we will continue to make efforts on a day-to-day basis. That is all from my side.
トヨタに国内300万台国内の生
3
産のことに
million
ついてのご質問だったと思いま
units
す。
production in Japan. Now, that was the second question, I believe, and this is Yamamoto
私
speaking.
の話という伺った話の引用で申し訳ないんですけ
This
れ
is
ども、
something I
やはり
heard from another person.
東日本大震災の後にですね、
After the Great East
東
Japan
北に
earthquake,
工場を作り、そこ
in
に
Tohoku, we set up
製
the
造基盤
factory
といいますか、産業の基盤といいます
and
か、
we set
雇用
up
です
a
とか、
foundation
そうい
for
ったことを
industry, including
作って
employment.
きたこと、これが結果的に
And as a
ずっと
result,
ずっと日本の自動車産業といいますか、
to the
やはり
Japanese
日本
auto
がその資源を外
industry,
から買ってこなきゃいけない中でですね、
which
じゃあどうや
has
ってその
to
外貨を
purchase materials
獲
from
得してくるんだ
outside of
というところ
Japan
がやっぱり
and
自動車産業の一つの
has
貢献している
to
役目
earn
いうような
foreign currencies
お
from
話を
outside
伺
of
ったことがあり
Japan.
ましてですね、やはり
We have been
も
able
ちろ
to
ん
make
グ
a
ローバルに事業を
contribution.
している会社ではございますけれども、日本も母国ではありますし、
Japan,
そこでしっかりと
we are a
自動
global
車産業
company,
が頑張る
but
という
Japan
ふうに
is our home
言っていただい
country.
たのかなというふうに思いますね。そういった意味もあるのかなと思っておりました。ちょっとお答えになっているかどうかわかり
think
ません。
people are supporting us in our efforts that we are doing in this country, and that's what the 3 million units means to TMC.
それでは次のご質問に参
Thank
り
you,
ます
Mr. Yamamoto. Let us move on to the next question
NHK タルノ
from
様
NHK
お願いいたします
Taruno-san, please.
画面を切り替えますので
I
ご
will
自身の
switch
映
the
像が画面
screen,
上
so
に
if
表
you
示され
see
ましたら
yourself
ご
on
発
the
言ください
screen, please start speaking.
ただいま画面を切り替えてお
We
り
are
ま
now
す
switching the screen.
NHK のタルノと申します。
Taruno of NHK, can you hear me?
お願いします
Yes, I can.
私からも2点お願
I
いい
also
たし
have
ます。
two questions
1点
to
目ですね。
ask. Question
ウ
number
クライ
one
ナロシア情
that
勢に
relates
絡
to
んでですね、
Ukraine and
ロシア
Russian
事業に関
situation.
し
In
て
relation to that, your
今後
business
ですね、
in
どのように
Russia,
やってい
how
くのか
are
とい
you
うことをお
going
聞かせくだ
to
さい。今現
do
状ですね、
with
物
your
流の
Russian
混乱で停止
business?
している状
Currently,
況だと思います
you
けれども、
suspended your
こ
operation
のロシア
because
事
of
業
the
ですね、
confusion
まだ
in logistics,
先
but
行き見通し
Russian
にくい状
business,
況が
the
続くと
outlook
思うんですけれ
remains
ども、
very uncertain, very
今
difficult
現
to
状
read
どうな
what's
のか、
going
そして
to
今後
happen
どうい
in
うふ
the
うにしていく
future.
のか
What's the
という
current
ところをお
status
聞かせいただけ
and
れ
what
ばと
are you
思い
going
ま
to
す。
do
で
with your
もう一
business
点
in
がですね、
Russia?
先ほど最
The
初の質
second
問でも出ま
question,
した
as was
回転
mentioned
感
in
につ
the
いてお
first
伺いしたいと
question
思います。
with respect
この
to
今日の
the
決算会見で
passing
も原材
the
料の
higher
高騰
cost
が
to
かつてない
prices,
規模
in
で
this meeting it was
上昇
mentioned
している
that
1兆
there
円以
has
上と
been
いうところですね、見込ん
unprecedented
でおられる
raw
という
materials
中
cost
で、
increase
その先ほど、
exceeding 1 trillion
ひょっ
yen.
としたらお客様
And
によっては
earlier,
ですね、
depending
も
upon
う少しお
customers,
金を頂戴した
you may
とい
be
うことも
able
という
to
ことをお話し
receive
され
a
てました
higher
けれども、
amount of
これ
consideration
日
for
本市
the
場も含め
products
てという理解
you
でよ
offer
ろ
to
しい
the
でしょうか。
customers.
なかな
Am
か
I right in
日本
understanding
市場
that
をです
that
ね、
includes
どの
Japanese
ように
market as
価
well?
格転嫁をしていくのか
How
という
can
の
you
は、
pass
まあ
the
判断
higher
難しい部
cost
分も
to
あるかと思うんで
prices
すけ
in
れ
the
ども、
Japanese market? I
日
think
本
it
市
is
場
a very
で
difficult decision
今
to
長
make.
引くデフレが
So
続いている
here
この日
in
本
the
市場でで
Japanese
すね、どの
market
よう
where
にこの
deflationary
原材料
trend
高
still
騰っていう
continues,
ところを
how are you
吸収していく
going
のか
to
というところをお
absorb
聞かせ
the
ください。以上
impact
です。
of higher raw materials prices in the Japanese market?
タロンさんありがとうございます。
Thank you, Mr.
ご
Taruno.
質問の1点目は、
The first question
今のウクライナの状況に
related
関
to
連
the
して、
current situation
弊
in
社トヨタ
Ukraine
のロシア事業
and
をどうしていくのかっていうことを
what
教えてほしいと
Toyota
いう
is
こと
going
だ
to
と
do
思いま
with
した。で
Toyota's
これは
business in
私
Russia.
方の方からご
And
説
I
明
will
申し上げます。
respond to that question,
続いてこの
Nagata
価格の話は
speaking.
先
And
ほ
with
ど私
respect
ご
to
質問申し上
prices,
げたん
I
ですが、改めて今非常にデフレで環境の厳しい日
answered
本
the
での
earlier
価格
question
対応
in
をど
the
うする
same
のかってい
line. In the
うご
very
質問だと思い
difficult
ますので、
deflationary
これも引
trend,
き続き
what we are going
私
to
の方
do
から
with the
ご説明
pricing
申し上げたい
level
と思います。
was the question. So
でま
let
ず
me just
ロシア
respond
の
to
事
both
業
of these
ということ
questions.
なん
With with respect to Toyota's business in Russia, since February 24, and I'm sure you still remember it very vividly in terms of the visual impact of that, Russia made an invasion into Ukraine, and starting from that, many precious lives have been lost due to that. And in addition to that, safe livelihoods are being threatened, and especially in Europe. And of course, Japan was no exception, but energy and food are becoming scarce. So that's the reality that we are confronted with. And many people throughout the world, together with them, we in Toyota are indeed heartbroken and seriously worried. We at Toyota believe that happiness is never born from aggression and a war caused by aggression. We sincerely hope that peace and security be restored to Ukraine and the world as soon as possible. That's an ardent desire. And furthermore, Toyota has customers who own approximately 100 million vehicles worldwide. And in addition to that, there are many stakeholders who support Toyota throughout the world, numerous stakeholders. And with respect to our business in Russia, we will try to keep our approach of gaining the understanding and empathy of our many stakeholders and people, including in Russia as well. And what we will be able to do is something that we will continue to consider and wrap our brains to. So that's all with respect to the Russian issue. With respect to the prices here in Japan, which might reflect the higher cost, depending upon the conditions of a region, or depending upon the people who use vehicles as an essential means for business, and in some cases it may be easier to pass on costs and others not so. As Mr. Taruno knows, here in Japan, the business confidence is very low, the business sentiment remains very stagnant, and also the disposable income of people is very difficult and slow to increase. So in that general context, are we going to raise price or not? As mentioned earlier, within Japan and the Japanese context, in the case of vehicles, especially mini vehicles or compact vehicles, who use vehicles as an essential means of their business, to raise prices charged to those people, I think is very difficult to do. But having said that, depending upon vehicles in different forms, there are sort of vehicles on which we can charge higher prices. So in that sense, by looking at each model one by one, and we are now studying in a very detailed and fine-tuned manner what would be the best approach that we can take. I hope you'll understand what we have in mind in that. So how Japanese customers using vehicles for in this current environment, we are making efforts so that customers will be satisfied and be happy being able to buy our cars in this very difficult environment, and that's how I'd like to understand our approach. Thank you, Mr. Taruno.
Now let us move on to the next question. From Wall Street Journal, Mr. Sean, please. We will switch the screen, so when you see yourself on the screen, please start your question.
Sean McLean from the Wall Street Journal. Can you hear me okay?
はい、聞こえております。お願いします。
We hear you.
So I have a question about rising prices as well, and I'd like to ask particularly about the U.S. market, because I think it's a big source of your profits. We're around record highs in transaction values in the U.S. of around $46,000. And what I'm wondering is, Toyota at all concerned about affordability of its products, particularly in the U.S., where maybe the average person can no longer afford a new car, and what Toyota is thinking about, if anything, doing about that? And the second question is about hybrid sales. I notice your electrified vehicle sales have started to increase. And while I understand that that might partly be influenced by the sort of model mix you have in the country, given production shortages, where do you see hybrid sales going in the next year or two? Do you think there's a lot of room to grow hybrids around the world, but particularly in the US?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sean. The first question was about the prices in the U.S. market. For Toyota customers, are we concerned about it being too high for Toyota customers? And that will be answered by Mr. Kon, EVP. The second question was that over the 1 or 2 years, do we see hybrid vehicle sales to grow globally? And if it is to grow, in which areas will that grow? And that will be answered by EVP Mr. Maeda, starting with Mr. Kon, please. So I will answer your first question about prices in North America. As Mr. Sean mentioned, it's not just for Toyota, but for North America overall, prices are going up. As a manufacturer, what we can do is to provide various options to customers. That is what we believe. As we mentioned before, on a global basis, we have a wide lineup, product lineup. In the United States, we have SUVs, pickup trucks are the main lines of products. But we also have sedans, hatchbacks. These compact cars are also part of our lineup. These are important products that we are offering to our customers. And we will continue to provide that wide variety of product lineup to our customers. And in addition to that, rather than just selling new vehicles to the customers, we also offer leasing options like full service lease. In Japan, we have Kinto, and also recently globally, we also have Kinto. So how to supply vehicles is also something we are having a wide variety or a wide, broad lineup on. And when we listen to what the dealers are saying in the past, incentives or price negotiations took place frequently, but recently, partly because inventory is low, which vehicle is in which pipeline and which vehicle comes with which options and what advantages those vehicles provide to the customer. These kinds of conversations take place at dealers, focusing on the product. And I think this is very good. And for the customer, more options for models, more options on how to purchase vehicles. We will provide these various options and have the customer choose. So that is all for the first point. And let me answer the second question. So in the future, including the United States, in 1 or 2 years, will hybrid sales go up? I think that was the question. If you look back, in the United States, when fuel prices go up, hybrid vehicle sales tended to go up in the past. So taking that history into consideration, currently we are seeing soaring crude oil prices. And not only in the United States, but globally, at least I think we can expect an increased trend of hybrid vehicle sales globally. So there's another factor behind hybrid vehicle sales going up in the United States. The latest product, RAV4. In the past, hybrid vehicles tended to focus on fuel economy, but the U.S. customers not only focus on fuel economy, but also they focus on driving comfort, including good acceleration. So the new RAV4 has strengthened that characteristics. And the RAV4 hybrid that is currently on the market, and the plug-in hybrids are also very favorably accepted by our customers. So that is the voice we hear from the market. So alongside the best-in-town activities, we will listen to the customer's voice in the United States to strengthen our products. We do think the market will grow, and taking into consideration the environmental issue, I think we should grow sales of hybrid vehicles. That is all. Thank you very much to Mr. Sean.
The
scheduled concluding time is approaching, and therefore I would like to ask the final question. Mr. Igarashi of Newspeak. The screen. So if you see yourself on the screen, please start speaking. Kiarashi-san of Newspeak, please. Kiarashi of Newspeak, thank you very much. I have two questions as well, if I may. The first question, this is somewhat redundant from the previous question, but what is your view of the BEV? In one of the pages, you talked about the outlook of sales. You talked about the increase of 593%, close to 600 increase in the BEV sales. And in the past, when you had discussion with respect to battery electric vehicles, many customers buy BEVs as the second car, not the first primary car. But in terms of the recent situations, and also considering the prevailing situations, the RZ and DC4X, including those, what is your view of the demand for BEVs? That's the first question. Secondly, in the earlier response to the question with respect to the change in the earnings structure after the global financial crisis, and in a sense, you described what has been done thus far, which resulted in the current situation in terms of operating structure. So in that general context, for the current fiscal year, starting from the 1st of April, you re-established the introduced executive vice president. You have been trying to reduce the number of directors or executives and try to accelerate the decision-making speed. That's what we've been talking about. So what is the objective of restoring the position of executive vice president? What is the view? And how the Toyota's management is going to evolve and transform going forward, especially starting the current fiscal year? Those are my two questions. Thank you, Kiara-san. The first question relates to the market of battery EV. What sort of change is foreseen? And the EVP will respond to that question. The second question related to the new executive lineup, which restore the position of executive vice president. And so what is the objective of that in the current fiscal year? And what sort of a change or transformation in the management structure is considered? Was the second second question. Kon will respond to that as Executive Vice President. Mr. Maeda, please. Thank you, Mr. Kiwara, for your question. In terms of the market trend of battery EV, that was a question, according to my understanding. And what I feel most important is that vis-a-vis the battery electric vehicles, the development in relation to that has been accelerating in the market. That relates to the fact that there is a broader product lineup in various OEMs, and also there are a greater number of options available for battery EVs. That's one aspect. And also in the United States, there has been tightening trend for regulations that cannot be disregarded. Globally speaking, such a very tough and rigorous regulation established was done for the first time in the United States. The United States is leading in that trend, and not just Toyota, but for other OEMs in the automotive industry. That is one factor accelerating various efforts by OEMs. This is called greenhouse gas regulations. So those regulations and also the market trend has been strengthening more than we had expected in the past. So as far as Toyota is concerned, you talked about RZ and BZ. We are yet to start receiving orders, but looking at the input in the market and general discussion in the market on those, there seems to be a heightened expectations for those models. And therefore, looking at the input or reaction of a customer in the market, and also different reactions of different regions of the global or worldwide, and those regulatory trends, and therefore the battery electric vehicles will get accelerated. I think there are greater factors that lead us to think in that way, but at the same time, there are concerning factors as well. As was mentioned in the presentation, soaring market material prices tend to become more manifest and more seriously in the case of the BEVs. As was mentioned in the presentation, the higher cost of materials of battery does have a huge impact in the overall cost structure. We talked about the possibility of reflecting costs on prices, but we have to take a good balance, and also in different regions, different sort of subsidies may be considered for those vehicles. And therefore, currently they tend to be more generous for those environmental vehicles, but customers are very sensitive to those developments. So we tend to take a very conservative approach in responding to that. So that's my response to your first question. Thank you.
Thank
you. With respect to your second question, in terms of the current executive lineup was the focus of your question. Since the global financial crisis, the lineup of executive officers and the system of senior advisors to the board, which was eliminated, and also with respect to the members of the board, we had more than 100 in the past, but currently internally with TMC only 6, including outside board members, including them 9. So the board has been downsized substantially, and that's not the only change. For the purpose of sharing information using IT tools used for meetings, and CEOs scattered throughout the world, and Toyota located in Japan, including them. We have weekly meetings so that information can be shared thoroughly and quite swiftly. So 13 years ago, this is something unthinkable and unimaginable, and this sort of change has been actually implemented and achieved. Starting in April of this year, you talked about the position of Executive Vice President restored, and I think there is very significance in that. Looking at myself, and what I personally consider is that, as Toyota as president says often, we live in the world where there is no right answer known to all of us. And in that world full of uncertainty, how can we manage and steer Toyota going forward? As far as TMC is concerned, if we can discover a problem, TMC does have an ability to find solution to those problems, which was demonstrated in the past. I think Toyota is a company that has ability to find solutions to various challenges or problems, but we will be faced with diversifying society characterized by variety of problems. Nobody knows what's going to happen going forward. So in that general context, ability to find and discover problems becomes very important. In the past, Toyota as a president was the only person trying to find and discover problems in many cases. But with three executive vice presidents working together with the president and trying to discover the problems in the world in which there is no right answer, we'll try to take countermeasures. Because there is no right answer known, we may not be able to find the right solution right away, but by discovering those problems, we'll just implement the various potential countermeasures, and that I think is what we are aiming at. So with that aim in mind, we will pursue our work going forward, and I hope you will continue to support us as we make those efforts going forward. That's all from me.
木原様、ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Mr. Kiyarashi.
それではこれにて決算説明会を終了させていただきます。本日はお忙しい中ご視聴いただきましてありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for listening despite your busy schedules today. Thank you.